Welcome to episode 7 of The Last Sell, where we dive into the sales game with stories from industry leaders. I'm your co-host, Kevin Hill, here with Richie Daigle, as always. How are you doing today, Richie?
Yeah, doing great, doing great. This was episode 7. Yeah, we're moving along. Kary Jablonski, CEO of Trucker Tools. Um, Really fantastic individual, super smart. Um, yeah, I'm always impressed when I'm hearing Kary talk and just having conversations with her. Super approachable, just great person to chat with. Was excited to have her on the show, and she had great stories. She delivered. She came through with
Yeah.
some really good stuff. Yeah, what were your big takeaways from this one?
The importance of channel sales, right? And learning that early, learning the difference between retail or knocking on each door and then having sellers in line with different channels and different markets to push the product. So I think that was a really big lesson that she learned very early, and it's probably one of the keys to her success, as well as working on selling yourself and what to do and what not to do.
Yep, and listening to her talk about the difference between working smarter and not harder. I think everybody in sales, a lot of people in sales, are real quick to beat their chest about how hard they grind. And how hard I work. Oh, I put in 100 hours this week and I made 10,000 cold calls and I'm a grinder. I'm just a worker when it comes down to it. And part of me when I hear that is like, how much of that is necessary? Is that the best way? Are you maximizing your impact that way, or is there a better way to where you can grow your impact by leveraging other sources or channels? And Kary figured that out quite early, earlier than most people probably could guess.
You better believe it. She really has. And also another key point that is really interesting is the discussion around questioning your assumptions. Right, once you get to a stalled deal, to be able to go back to the drawing board, take all your assumptions and question them all, and try a different tact. Because every company is different, every bureaucracy is different. She goes into detail about that, and I think that's a very important uh, lesson. Put your pride aside, question what you've been doing on this deal, and change it if necessary.
And learn and analyze things after the fact. I mean, you are going to see whether you win or lose a deal, you're going to learn and see way more information and details about that deal after it's done or not done or like closed in some fashion than you are in the middle of it.
Yes.
Period. Like you're never going to be able to identify all the levers and variables when you're in the midst of it. And even after the fact, you'll see more of them, but probably still not all of them. And so you have to have that humility in place to where, you never turn off the curiosity faucet, so to speak.
Yep. You're exactly right. And with that said, go PayHawk. So if you're collecting invoices, you're trying to get paid quickly, you need a credit card processing and a payment processing company to help you out. Go PayHawk is that company. You can go to www.gopayhawk.com, sign up for a demo and kind of see how everything works and claim your $250 credit with GoPayHawk. Tell them that you got it from the last sell, and they will set you up with that deal. But without any further ado, again, let's go straight to the podcast.
Let's get into it. So, Kary, I'm embarrassed to ask, but I have to ask, like, what is the right way to pronounce your last name? Because people butcher my last name frequently, and I want to make sure I hear from you, like, the correct pronunciation.
I appreciate you asking that. It is pronounced exactly as it's spelled, Jablonski.
Jablonski. Got it.
Because I
Okay.
think I butchered your name on a Put That Coffee Down at a Freight Raise event. Even after I asked you, I think I got on camera and still butchered it for whatever reason.
I forgive you. We're all good.
And yeah. And so, where are you sitting today, Kary? Like, remind me where you're based out of.
I'm based out of Chicago, so I am at my office here in a bit of an odd phone booth, which is why if you're watching this, the video might look a little strange. But I'm just in the heart of Chicago right now.
Nice. Nice. Are you always from Chicago, or have you moved to different places? Or
Yeah, I have. I've been in Chicago for somehow this is, I think, coming up on 5 years, which is wild that I've been through five Chicago winters, and they really have not been as bad as they say they are. And I know everyone said this winter in particular has been really warm, but even the last four were not horrible. But that's probably because I'm from Boston originally. So I'm very used to it, and I would take cold temperatures over several feet of snow. And fortunately, get a lot less snow out here than we do in New England. So it's been easy. But yeah, I've actually lived all over. I grew up in New Jersey and then mostly in Massachusetts, right outside Boston, and then went to college down in DC, spent some time in DC, and then lived abroad briefly in Jakarta, Indonesia, and then for a while in Mexico City before I came to the Midwest. So I've been in Central Time now for 7 or 8 years, and Chicago is currently home.
all those
How's
places sound cold until you got to Indonesia and Mexico City. So, like, how did you deal with that? That had to have been a bit of a shock dealing with that sort of heat in the summertime.
Yes, Indonesia was very, very hot. There is no sugarcoating that. Mexico City is actually at elevation, and quite a bit. It's 50% higher than Denver is. It's about a mile and a half of elevation, around 75, 8,000 feet. So it can get warm, but it's not hot. Like DC is probably the hottest place I've lived for a long period of time. It just gets gross and sticky in the middle of the summer there. Mexico City was pretty, get up to 75-ish, but never significantly higher than that.
Did
what were
not
you
know
doing
that.
in Mexico City?
I was working for Uber, so I worked on ride sharing and Uber Eats in Latin America, and Mexico City was the home office. So I spent about a year and a half there, working all across the region, but based in Mexico.
What's different about living abroad rather
Oh,
than in
I
the state?
mean, it's such an awesome experience for anyone who has the good fortune to be able to do it. Um, it sounds so obvious and cliche, but it does just it expands the way you think about the world. And it's like, as someone who had just lived in America my whole life and had not traveled abroad extensively, it just opens up your eyes to like there are these other massive regions of the world where everything is done differently and handled differently. And um, yeah, I just felt like it was like a little piece of my brain was unlocked to realize, oh my God, there is a massive, massive world out there, far beyond just what's going on in America day to day. So, kind of that still impacts me today when I think about it. From a day to day perspective, though, it is really humbling to feel like you never quite are on the inside. There's always going to be some sort of cultural difference. I had wonderful, wonderful, wonderful colleagues in Mexico who were so welcoming. It was a really global crew. It was not just Mexicans, it was all over Latin America and all over the world. So I was really fortunate to have a really diverse group of friends there. But um, yeah, just you're just kind of constantly aware that this is not my my home, and that can be exhausting after a while.
Do you still travel a fair amount? Do you still try to travel internationally to kind of scratch that itch, or when was the last time
Yeah.
you were out of the country?
Yeah, the last time I left the country was in the fall. I was down in Chile and in Argentina, actually. My boyfriend is doing a graduate degree, and he was able to spend some time abroad as part of that. So he was in Santiago for an extended period of time. So I went down to visit him, and then we went to Argentina over Thanksgiving, which was really awesome. Highly recommend to anyone who's never been. It's beautiful. We're actually there for the presidential election, which was really interesting. Don't have any big uh, international trips on the books this year. Lots of domestic travel though. I've been home for the last 2 weeks, but starting next week, I'll be hitting the road every single week of April. So getting ready for that.
So, speaking of travel, if there's one place that you can go for vacation, like one last vacation, like where are you going? Your favorite destination, either some place that you've been before that you want to go back to, or if you just have one more vacation left, where in the world are you going to go?
That is such a hard question. My mind initially went to Maine, actually. Since I grew up in New England, I grew up going to Maine a lot. And in the summertime, it's so, so beautiful. I think Maine's slogan on their license plates is the way life should be. So probably go up to Lake Sebago in Maine and spend some time on the lake, just enjoying the summertime there.
And follow up question: what is your favorite beverage? Could be alcoholic, non-alcoholic. What does Kerry
Mm.
like to sip on?
Oh man. Okay, I love chocolate milk. Like a what is it? Fairlife chocolate milk. So delicious. Often crave that. My go-to drink is a hazy IPA though. A good hazy is tough to beat for me.
Okay, so imagine, fast forward into the future. You're done working. Work is way behind you, and you are what was this lake in Maine? You said Lake
L-
Sebago.
Lake Sebago, yeah.
You are at Lake Sebago. You still have the chocolate mustache, from the chocolate milk that you just finished. You just, forgot to wipe it, but it's been long enough so that the hazy IPA that you have in your hand doesn't feel like it's going to be some weird mix of chocolate milk and hazy IPA. But you're sitting here on the side of the lake, and work is done. You're retired. You're living life the way it should be in Maine, and you're thinking back, you're just having a moment of, looking back over the course of your career. What was the last sale? What was the last thing that you ever sold? Or what was the last project that you worked on in your professional career before retiring?
I sold my own company. That's got to be it. I built something and I took it all the way through to a sale. So TBD exactly what that is going to be, but um, I would love to be a founder someday, start something and fully see it off on my own.
I take it as a next chapter in your life, right? That's down the road and something that you're thinking about eventually.
Exactly, exactly. A long ways away from that right now. I've got got my hands full and really loving what we're building with Trucker Tools, but uh, it's always been a dream of mine to start my own business and sell it. And who knows, it could be big, it could be small, it could be. I think owning a bookstore or something like that would be an absolute blast and dream. So TBD exactly what it is, but it's something that I have built with a team of people I really care about.
Do you always have, I find myself with various ideas that are bouncing around in my brain from time to time. I share some of these ideas with Kevin or with other friends. I'll say, do you think this could work? Or like, what are your thoughts on this? And do you feel the same way? Do you constantly have like little micro ideas that are always like, I wonder if this could be something, or I wonder if it's this? And do you criticize? Like, what do you do with those ideas? Like, what does an idea have to do to be something that you would act upon?
Yeah, all the time. And then sometimes I realize I've just invented something that already exists. Like, I think I invented railroads the other day when I was like, what if instead of having to drive, you could just put something on a box and it would move on a preset rail. I was like, oh, that is a train. So we already have that. Good thing we already got that going. So yes, I do think about that all the time and talk about it all the time. Um, and the nice thing about at work, at least, we have the resources to be able to build and move fast at Trucker Tools that when it's kind of within the context of freight tech, I'm able to execute really quickly on those things, which is really, really fulfilling. But I have them all the time, just kind of walking down the street and talking to friends.
You have an angle or something that would really create excitement because we all talk to entrepreneurs every single day in what we do, and I find some really great ideas. Right, people have some really great ideas. They're executing those, um, but it's just not in my wheelhouse. Right, it's
Hmm.
nothing that I would want to drop everything and go spend 60, 80 hours a week. But, I have a lot of respect for them. But I have my own little wheelhouse that I'm always looking for something that, it's like a bug. You get bitten by the bug and you go all in. Do you have any kind of lanes or things that always pique your interest?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously anything in brokerage tech right now is really interesting to me. And I'm really interested in particular around how kind of we're evolving. I think there's been a lot of SaaS products obviously developed in the brokerage space over the last, let's call it 5 to 7 years, but we're really moving into the era of DaaS and data products and how data products can be augmented on top of those SaaS products. So that's something I'm thinking a lot about right now at work itself. Outside of, I mean, I have tons of other interests beyond um, what we're doing at Trucker Tools and in Freight Tech. I love the idea of building something around community for women and empowerment for women. So I think a lot about what are things I could be doing there and how could I support women with them developing their own careers. Um, I I really like. I would love to start like a. I live in a neighborhood without a great bagel shop. I would love to start a bagel shop. There's a lot of like very kind of brass tacks businesses too that I uh, I think I would love to execute out on beyond the realm of like just software right now.
Yeah, I love that. There's certain like small businesses that are more community oriented, like a breakfast restaurant or
Yes,
a big
exactly.
coffee shop or a bookstore or a bed and breakfast or in some beautiful location or something like that that are kind of lifestyle businesses that are kind of attractive as well.
Exactly. Exactly.
So if you think back in time, what was the first sale? And this could be you selling an idea or a concept, or it could be selling something as part of a fundraiser when you're in, high school or middle school or something. But what is the first idea or item that you ever remember selling?
Yeah, the actual item that I first ever remember selling is, I think it must have been elementary school, not even quite middle school for me, but we would have a wrapping paper fundraiser every year, where basically the idea was to raise money for school by selling wrapping paper to your parents and their friends and other people about town. And that is what I remember as kind of my first introduction to here's how you be commercial. And um, the the point I really remember is that I think that's how I discovered channel sales. Because I remember a bunch of friends would be going door to door trying to knock, say, hey, you want some wrapping paper, Mrs. So and so. And I had two parents who worked. My mom and dad both worked and went into offices. So I realized that I could scale myself by having them sell on my behalf by bringing in the sheet of paper that we had to take orders on and placing it with some cookies on a conference table in the lunchroom and having them do some of that kind of sales development on my behalf. So I remember being very, very successful with that. And everyone else around town was trying to tap into the same people locally in the neighborhood. And I was able to, they worked downtown in the city. So I was able to tap into those networks of people who did not live in the town I grew up in, who were not being inundated by, tens and dozens of middle schoolers to buy wrapping paper, which was an exciting realization for me and still informs how I think about how do you scale and get into new markets.
It's a very important lesson, isn't it? Either you're
Yes.
going to knock on every door or you're going to get a channel partnerships and channel sales and kind of retail versus wholesale sort of quandaries. It's very important, isn't it?
For sure, for sure. Yeah, it's always nice to unlock something and you're like, oh wow, this is actually a lot easier than I thought it would be, as opposed to me having to put in the sweat equity of going door to door. If I can just put that on someone else who's willing to work on my behalf, hey, I'll take that. Work smart, not hard.
I love that you figured all this out in elementary school. Like,
I mean, that's I think I only put it like all together as a framework later in life, but I do remember realizing that I can move really fast if I just get us to someone else to go to a different place and talk to new people.
did you like file like a report afterwards? You have to do a project of like, here's how channel sales will help you with wrapping paper sales and what I learned. And I could just see like presenting some project in like fourth grade of like the successfulness of channel sales.
I was such a nerd growing up and like absolutely loved schoolwork and doing well and projects. So I don't think I actually had to submit anything, but you can rest assured that I had plenty of other like nice posters that I put together for school. I really miss putting together a good poster after a project. It's so satisfying.
Did you do the
Oh yeah.
like the folding? You know what I'm talking about? Like the
The
big card.
trifolds, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so into like projects, and I remember making a trifold poster in my free time for fun about weather. I must have been like in fourth or fifth grade, and as opposed to doing what normal kids would do on the weekend, I decided to like pull together. I don't know. I must have been reading some book about weather, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna put this into a poster format. And I think that is, it's really sad to say aloud, but um, unfortunately, how I was like, as a kid, and I do think it does translate into how I operate as an adult now, and that I I think I'm a very structured thinker, and I like taking big nebulous ideas and making them very, very palatable and digestible. And that's what those trifold posters did for me.
Excel is probably a really good tool that you like to use quite a bit because you can put the numbers down in a structured format. You can run any scenario you kind of want to and play around with it and kind of
You can
goes
ask my
in as
team.
opposed to.
Google Sheets is my love language. I love it. Use it constantly. I run the business off of it. It's pretty sad.
Doesn't everybody?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, definitely. When I was at Uber, we were like I don't know, $40 million for excuse me, $40 billion business. That company was running off of Google Sheets still. It's crazy. It is the ultimate tool for a business.
It really is. It really is. Um, Going back to sales, so there's your first sell. What was kind of your easiest sell that you ever wandered into and thought it was going to be much more complicated than it was, or maybe not,
Yeah.
and it everything just clicked.
Yeah. I think sometimes when it comes to uh, selling myself, I've had a bunch of sales where it's been easier than I expected. And I don't mean that to come off um, not without humility, but I think when I think about some job interviews over the years and the amount of the stakes that I felt going into them, and then realizing if I'm going to show up really well, if I really truly do just show up as myself and tell stories like from the heart, without trying to make myself seem like I am something I'm not. There have been some that have clicked uh, and gone a lot better than I think I expected them to. So yeah, when it really comes to selling myself, I think that's because it's a skill I've been working on now for 20, 30 years. Um, I've really been able to just hone that and be able to show up and show up authentically.
It's essential, isn't it? You have
Yeah,
to sell yourself before you can sell anything else,
it's
whether
everything.
it's a
It's
client, employer,
everything.
to anybody, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's one of the hardest things to do too. It's one of the hardest things to grasp, right? How do you
Yeah.
go about it? I'm not really sure myself. You just
Yeah.
kind of fall into it.
I've spent so much, I think it's such an iterative process. I mean, I've been working on it in a self-aware kind of like, oh, I'm trying to think about how do I sell myself? What is the value I can bring to a group? Since I was 18 and getting a job in college, um, I've been going through just this constant process of thinking, okay, what is my story? How have I gotten to where I am? What were the major inflection points? And now how do I use that to talk about what value I can bring moving forward? It's something I've been working on for, yeah, well over 20 years now.
Yeah, because you have to leave out all the boring parts or the
Hmm.
non-essentials, right? The least dramatic points, and really hone in on those inflection points and get it down
Exactly.
to bite size sound bites almost.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
There's like a weird contradiction that's with selling yourself, right? Because if I walk into a meeting and I'm like, Kevin, Kary, let me tell you about how amazing Richie is. And this is like Richie's just incredible. You won't even believe it. I feel like you're both like, all right, how quickly can I leave? Like, how long do I have to stay? This guy is making my skin crawl. I want to run away. So like this whole idea of selling yourself, the more you do it straightforward, the worse it is. like,
Yeah.
but then you have to be like indirect. You have to be more kind of, I don't know, objective in how you talk about different milestones, and then also more value and other people focused. I feel like in order
Yep.
to come off as authentic, and you have to be authentic about those things as well in order to come off as authentic.
and it's kind of like when you're selling a product and you come in and you just vomit features and benefits. Every covers everything. It's the same thing, right?
Yep.
People just tune out because it's too much. They're not interested in it. I think you have to share things that people are interested in and have kind of given you a clue that they're interested in this, or they have a past experience in X, and you share your experience with that, and make it sound impressive, I suppose. But keep it short and sweet in a lot of respects.
Yeah. And I think you have to do discovery as well when you're thinking about how do I sell myself, much like when you're selling a software product, for example, figuring out, okay, what actually matters to this other person. And this all sounds so nefarious when I'm saying it, but it really does just come down to being curious about other people and understanding what their motivations are, why they care, why they're there. And then the more you can figure that out, the more you can tailor your own story to really hit the high points that are their similar high points. And I think that's also a really effective
If you go back to software
tactic.
sales, right? If you have 10 features, right? And we've all been buyers of technology or anything, right? Maybe I just only care about one thing. And I go into
Exactly.
something, I don't care what else it does. Does it do this? And that's where you start. And then you can kind
Yep.
of add on things after that. But that's discovery, right?
Yep. Totally. Totally.
There's a little bit of a nuance there, right? If I walk in trying to prove something, I'm gonna the conversation that everything's gonna go one direction. If I walk in with a curiosity mindset, then the conversation, everything's gonna go. It's gonna have a completely different trajectory. I feel like that's kind of what we're getting at, and what you might be alluding to a little bit, Kary, is like, how do you don't necessarily want to prove something, but sometimes being curious, you're going to prove things naturally along the way when you're not even trying to, just from asking good questions.
Yeah. And everyone wants to be asked questions about themselves and their experiences. The more you can make someone feel like you care and you're interested, you can be so much more effective at whatever you're trying to accomplish.
So what would, kind of go in a different direction, the hardest, most difficult, pull your hair out, frustrating, emotionally draining sale? What was that? What
Oh,
sale kind of was most difficult in all of those ways?
yeah. So many come to mind that it's hard to narrow it down to a single one. I think we've had a couple in my time at Trucker Tools that have been well over a year and a half in the making, and I think those are the hardest ones because they require so much patience and realize like you can want to be doing everything in your power to bring something to life, and I myself can see, okay, if we just do these 5 things, get these people on board, like let's just do it. We could do that all. We'd have it all done by Friday this week. Why would there not be a reason to sell and realizing or reason to sign, realizing that there are very, very real internal politics at a lot of the customers that we sell to, which are freight brokerages, and that those need to be respected and given time to develop, and that the process of getting buy-in is not something that a third party can come in and do because it's going to destroy trust between the people at the organization. So I can think of one in particular that we sold just a couple of months ago that was well over an 18-month sale, and um, we just kind of kept running into the same wall of uh, not being able to get our solution, our load tracking solution, prioritized by the decision maker. So what we ended up having to do is find a couple of different champions within the organization who were willing to go to the mat for us and really exert their own power of influence. Even though we had a direct line with the decision maker, nothing we said was ever actually going to make a difference. It all we really had to equip these people who are at slightly lower levels within the organization to influence up and really use data more than anything to make the business case for what we were trying to do. Um, so I think any sale like that, where it just feels like it logically does not make sense to not do this. We're going to save you money. We're going to give you higher levels of service. But you don't want to hear it from me. You've got to hear it from someone else are the most frustrating because yeah, sometimes corporate politics are annoying and silly, but they really do matter in the power dynamic and culture of organizations, and they have to be respected.
They exist at all places at all times within any corporate or bureaucracy. You have to deal with it, and you have to be proactive and creative about it.
Totally, totally. And figuring out who can kind of operate on your behalf, I think is key.
And it's someone different each organization, right?
Yep.
You have to go in and find that.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's a humbling thing, right? To come face to face with the reality that you don't know everything about this other company that you've been in conversation with for 18 months. You know, as is in sales, we want to control everything, and we want to find out our champion, figure out our work back plan, figure out our timelines, figure out the need, quantify the ROI, put everything on paper and say, this is a watertight deal. And we know all the variables and we have a handle on things. But I think I would argue that that's never a 100%, math problem. Like there's always going to be an element of unknown. There's always going to be a dimension, and it might that dimension of unknown may even be unknown within that organization. They
Yeah.
also may not really know, and that's kind of the unsettling piece for salespeople, especially when they
Yeah.
come faced with that. Is why is this happening? Why is this dragging? What's going on? I think we got to lean into those issues and that uncomfortable position. Like there's a lot that can be learned there, and that can make or break a deal.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Definitely.
It is. You always have to go back to the drawing board, no matter what project it is, whether it's numbers based or people's based, sales based, engineering. Doesn't really matter. You have to always, at some point in the process, when things aren't working, or you need to get over a plateau, you need to be very willing to go back to the drawing board and rethink every assumption that you have,
Yep.
and play that exercise, because that's the only way through those barriers.
Yep.
So, what's the sale that you are most proud of? May not be the biggest or the smallest or the quickest or the longest or the most arduous, but is there a sale that you're part of that you're like, I feel so good about this, whether it was the creativity to get the deal done or who you were doing business with or what came after the fact, but whatever, or maybe something different. But what are you most proud of in terms of sales or a specific sale?
Yeah. I'll go all the way back to college for this one. So I worked at a student-run business in college. We were a catering company on campus, and we worked with largely academic departments, student groups, professors, symposiums that would happen on campus, selling bagels, coffee, sandwiches, really just anything to make the event, to bring catering to the event. So we had a couple of really big contracts with some university events, and my junior year heading into my senior year when I was in a leadership position, we were going after our biggest sale ever. It was for new student orientation, and it was going to require us to put together something like 4,000 boxed lunches in a very, very short period of time. And we were a small team. We were maybe 20 people. And again, we were in, like, this was all college kids. The inmates ran the asylum. There were no adults in the room here. So convincing academic administrators to trust us with such a big event. Orientation is really when, like, you're making the sale as a university to say, hey, you made the right choice, you're coming to the right place for the next 4 years, great job, welcome aboard. You want to make the right impression. And I think there were parents at this event too, which only raised the stakes even higher. It wasn't just students. So I was really, really proud of that sale. We made that sale in the spring semester heading out to orientation, which happened sometime in August later that year, because it was by far the most operationally complex deal we'd ever done in catering. Again, like, this was a small catering operation. So putting together something as complicated as 4,000 box breakfasts, we didn't have the space for it. We didn't have the cooler space for it. We didn't have the hands. We had to figure out kind of all of these things on the fly. And we had to really sell the dream of what we could do and how, by supporting us and kind of our student run mission, the university was going to be acting in really good faith, and kind of living out, practicing what they preach in terms of supporting students and them achieving their dreams. And we were up against real professionals. That as a college kid feels really, really good to be trusted with something that could easily go to someone with so much more legitimacy and credibility to their name. So I was really proud of that kind of impassioned sale that we made and the ability that we were able to pull it off.
Those are
That's
always
awesome.
good, right? The ones where you sell the dream and vision, you quite don't have it figured out yet,
Exactly.
but it pushes you to figure it out.
Exactly. Exactly.
Where did you go to college at?
I went to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C.
DC, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah. It's a city school, so there's not a ton of room on campus. So it's hard to find all that space to put together the box breakfasts.
It is very limited on space there
Yeah.
within DC. What's the funniest sell you ever had that you just keep sitting back and laughing whenever you think about it?
Oh man. I don't know if I have a funniest sale itself, more than we have really funny customers and crazy things happen. And uh, the characters are pretty hilarious. Man, I don't know if I have a great answer off the top of my head for that.
Then
I
I'll
just
ask
think the
you
character.
this. Let
Yeah.
me ask you this. You've been in different industries, right? We all
Yep.
three have. Do you find that freight brokerage and transportation have per capita, maybe density wise, the most characters of any
Oh,
industry that you've been in?
it is not even close, without a doubt. And I think that's in part because we all talk about selling service and technology and all these things at brokerages, but brand is such a massive part of it. When you're in a pretty commoditized industry like truck brokerage, you have to. It's much like any brokerage function. You really have to figure out how you stand out. So being a character and building that personal brand for yourself is, of course, you have to back it up. Like there's no excuse for actual delivery and service, timeliness, having a easy to work with tech stack. But I really do think that's why we see a higher percentage of characters in this space because it's just good business. And if you're not doing it, I think you're doing something wrong.
You're more memorable character.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's really all that matters. Do you come top of mind? If you're memorable and you give off confidence, like there's truly nothing that you can do to better set yourself up from a personal branding perspective.
Very true.
Yep.
Yeah, and I agree with that. By far, the most characters, natural born characters.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's for many of the same reasons that you just laid out. You have to be a little bit different. A lot of these characters are entrepreneurs anyway, which is a little bit of a crazy mentality. And
Hmm.
yeah, you just have to be a little bit wild and bold to make it as a freight broker. You really do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It
Yeah,
seems
I
like a
can't
lot
think
of
of.
people say that freight brokerage found them. Like I don't know too many people that when I ask them, they're like, "Yeah, ever since I was in kindergarten, I've wanted to be a freight broker." Like it's not the childhood dream of. I mean, I'm sure there's that person out there, and apologies for that person, but a lot of people will say that oh, freight brokerage found me, and now I'm never leaving. It's like a lot of people just fall into this industry one way or another, and they get stuck. Um, and I don't know if that's because they're characters or because it's like which came first, the chicken or the egg, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I certainly never thought I would be going into freight. And here I am 3 years in, and I can absolutely see why that's the case. That once you get in, you really don't get out because I think it's because it's such a fragmented industry riddled with so many problems that everyone can see potential to make a difference, to build something themselves, to kind of solve a problem that hasn't been solved yet. So there's just that sort of fragmentation breeds opportunity from my perspective.
Yep, it is full of opportunity. There's no reason to leave. Um,
Hmm.
it's a very small industry.
Yeah.
Smaller than you think. And
Yeah.
once you start meeting everybody, the opportunities just become more available
Yep.
in a
Without a
lot of
doubt.
ways. Yeah,
Kary,
tell you
what
why
was
later.
the sale that you learned the most from? If you went back and said this sale was such a meaningful and like educational experience, what was that sale that was most educational?
Yeah, I think I almost feel like you learn more from the deals you lose than the deals you win, honestly. Um, so I think, yeah, I could talk about a deal we won, but I really do think the deals that you don't win are the ones where you learn, okay, here's the gap and here's what we need to do to close a future sale. So um, I think I've learned a ton. Really back my the early first couple of weeks, actually, I had at Trucker Tools. This isn't even a sale, but it was that we lost a customer, a really large customer, top 20 brokerage, very tech forward. It was a huge deal, one of our biggest load tracking deals. And I had just started at the company, so I had, really getting up to speed. I'm like, oh, well, this is too bad. Got to figure out what's going on. So hopped on a call with one of their senior decision makers, and turned out that I just wanted to understand, hey, what happened here? How did you decide to leave us? Why didn't we win this renewal? And uh, it was really all about ELT tracking. And I'll be completely honest, that was not something that we had really prioritized. Um, Back when I was starting at the business. We were always mobile first tracking solution. And I am so grateful that that happened so early on in my tenure, because it was definitely like the kick in the rear end that I needed to say, okay, we've got to make moves fast, because if we don't, we're not going to exist as a load tracking business in a year or two if we don't solve this massive product gap we have now. So we started really doubling down on our ELD team, and standing up an entire organization to support onboarding, and figured out how do we do this better and different than some of our competitors are doing. And 3 years later, I think we're getting noticed all the time now for what we built from the ELD world. So I think and losing those sort of sales or losing a customer is an absolute punch to the gut, because you know how hard you work to bring them on board. But in this case, I think it was actually it ended up being good for us, because it led to this whole new development of a whole new part of our product, and has totally changed our product strategy. So that's the deal I'd say I learned the most from.
Going off on that a little bit, what's the most important sales lesson or lessons that you learned since becoming CEO? Things that you didn't realize about sales before that you now grasp, or that you now hold
Yeah,
hold dear.
I think that sales is, yes, we talked about selling ourselves and showing up well and the interpersonal nature of it. That is absolutely important. But sales is a really, really technical science as well, and appreciating what goes into orchestrating a large deal where you've got five, six, seven stakeholders involved on the customer side, maybe two to three on your own internal side. Um, how important it is to be running a really, really tight process there, and how that can make or break you as an organization. How when it comes to sales, it's not just about kind of showing up and taking someone out to lunch and really getting their buy-in as, oh, we're buds. That's not what sales is about. Sales is about building a ironclad business case for someone to help them solve a very, very specific problem. And kind of that problem solving orientation, as opposed to, I'm selling this whole feature and this whole product set. No, we are selling a couple of solutions to specific pain points. Has been a big shift for me when I think about how I sell as a CEO.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's the big sales come from specificity. Did I say that right? It's got lots of syllables in it, but it's being able to pinpoint an exact ROI and make it real, and that comes
Exactly.
down to the exact use case. And it's this another kind of contradictory sort of stance where you have on one hand it's not personal, right? It's not you and your thoughts and opinions or your customers' thoughts and opinions. It's no, there's a problem and this problem needs to be fixed. And either your technology does that or it doesn't. Like it's one or the other. So there's an impersonal aspect to it all. But there's also a personal aspect in that the other side has to have trust that they can believe that what you're saying is true and honest and geared towards solving that problem. So there's this weird kind of dialectical thing happening where it's about you and the trust and them having trust in you, but it's also not about you or them. It's mostly about solving a problem.
Yep. And that's what's going to win you a deal, is solving that problem and doing it in a very specific, pointed way. they're only going to be interested in doing that if they trust you. So that's kind of the door opener, but it's not going to close the deal.
Yeah, I think a lot of people gauge salespeople on their likability in a lot of
Yeah,
ways, or how good they are at getting in front of people. But there's that back half of it that you actually have to fix the problem, right?
yep,
So
yep,
you have to actually have a good solution. People can go have lunch with you all the time and enjoy themselves. But if if you don't have the capabilities to fix that problem, that you don't have the solution, that's where it ends, and it's going to end there every single time.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. So, Kary, where can our listeners find you? How can they get in touch with you? How can they learn more about Trucker Tools? Yeah, what's the best way for people to reach you?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Kary Jablonski, spelt like it sounds, and on Twitter as well. Same. My handle is just my name. Or feel free to shoot me an email, kjablonski@truckertools.com. Love hearing from folks.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Kary. Always a pleasure speaking with you. Every time I'm going to various conferences, you're always one of the people that I'm hoping to run into to say hi and catch up if we have time. So, pleasure having you on this on the show. And thanks again. Really enjoyed the conversation. We'll have to have you back. I feel like there's more stories that we can dive into. So, um,
Definitely.
yeah, thanks for your time today.
Thank you both. I really appreciate it.